Yes.
I've been doing this job at Angel Mounds for 17 years, and this is probably the most nervous I've ever been at a talk. Because I'm the one revealing all this stuff to everybody, so if it's wrong, it's my fault. It's a very long, drawn-out title there, and there's a story behind that. When I started here 17 years ago, we made an effort to try to find what happened to the personal effects of Glenn and Ida Black. And we hit a roadblock, and we were told it was gone. It didn't exist anymore. And so that's why we left it. And for 15 to 16 years, that was what we thought the case was, that it was all gone. Up until that point, we only knew this. Oh, come on. This was the extent of the personal aspect of Glenn and Ida Black that we had. He's buried in Crown Hill Cemetery up in Indianapolis. Ida's right next to him. I contacted the Eli Lilly company. I said, do you have any photographs of Glenn and Ida Black when Lilly would come down here and hang out? And they scoured all of Lily's photo albums, and this was the picture they found for me. And so for the next 4 or 5 years, this is all I had to go off of as being a personal photograph of Glenn and Ida at the house. This is probably about 1939, and this was taken by Eli Lilly. And like I said, this is all we had. And then last year, this fine lady here showed up, called. 2 weeks I was up there as fast as I could. We have a collection.
You beat IU.
Yeah, I beat IU. That was the whole goal, to get there before IU got to her. So I took the collections manager over at Harmony with me up to Kay-Ann's house, and she pulled out all these boxes and boxes, and I think my hands were trembling because all the stuff that I had longed to see for all these years were right here in front of me. Photos of the interior of the house, photos of Lily hanging out with Glenn and Ida, road trips with Eli Lilly, just all this amazing stuff. And it actually raised more questions and it gave me more answers about Glenn and Ida. And this will be mostly about Glenn and Ida, but toward the end of the talk, I'll talk about these amazing road trips that they took with Ruth and Eli Lilly as well. And I know some of you probably have some personal stories. I know the people here in the front row are Bill Rood's grandchildren. He was basically the caretaker here on the property. He lived one house up the road from us. The state tore it down because it was unfit for human habitation. It had no running water or electricity, I believe. Isn't that the story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my sister had to move out.
And we have daffodils that pop up in the woods there. That's the only way we know where the house stood for that location. So we started delving into all of this material, and just an amazing amount of things started popping up. The photograph of Glenn over on the far left is probably when he was in a Dixieland band in Indianapolis in his early 20s. That's probably the earliest photograph I've ever seen of the man. And I've sent it out to all, archaeologists all over the country, and they said they've never seen one younger than that. That's Ida, probably the same time period, and there they are dating with their Model A. They were married on October 26, 1931, something I also didn't know until we got all this material. Glenn was born in Indianapolis in 1900. He went to Arsenal Tech High School up in Indianapolis. His house, where he grew up, was about 8 blocks, maybe 10 blocks away from Arsenal Tech. I think actually I'll have a photograph of that here in a second. He worked for the Fairbanks Morse Scale Company, and he got laid off. For those of you who don't know how he ended up here at Angel Mounds, in 1931, he was unemployed, hanging around the Indiana Historical Society in Indianapolis, and Lilly, who was either the president or high up at the Historical Society at that time, wanted to take a road trip around Indiana. And in May of 1931, he told Glenn, you're going to drive my car with myself, a man named Eli Guernsey, who was a state representative from Bedford, and William K. Moorhead, who was this notable anthropologist from the University of Chicago. Angel Mounds was the last stop on their whirlwind trip, and that's where the two, Lilly and Black, fell in love with the place. So one of the slide cases had this address, 815 Oakland Avenue, Indianapolis, and all these pictures of them hanging out in the backyard. The gentleman sitting with Glenn on the bench is his brother, James Thornton Black. I figured he would go by James, but Ida's letters all call him Thornton. So that's how he went. And then the photograph over here on the far right is their mother in the backyard of her home. I called the Indiana Historical Society and I said, where were his checks sent before he moved to Angel Mounds? And they said 815 Oakland Avenue, Indianapolis. This, I believe, is wedding day. This is not that house, but it's somewhere in that time period, and everyone's dolled up to this photograph. There's also a couple photographs of them hanging out in a park wearing war bonnets, which isn't PC, so I didn't show that one. But it was very fortuitous of what was coming for him, I guess. And there's just a really good picture of the two boys. There was an infant son who died in infancy, and he's buried with Glenn, his mother, father, and Ida in Crown Hill. James Thornton lived in Dallas, Texas, and he is buried out there, and he had no children either, so there was no descendants to track down on that side of the family. And that was the backyard of the home there. And about a month ago, I forced my two daughters to go with me to hunt down the house, and they locked the doors when we got into the neighborhood. It has seen better days. The backyard is nothing but grown up in weeds and briars and things like that. But the house still stands there. And then I thought this was a really cool photo of him, probably about age 30. After he started working for the Indiana Historical Society, he worked on the Nolan Mound, which is over in Dearborn County by Cincinnati. He dragged Ida along with him. There's actually a film that IU has online showing them working on the Nolan Mound. And when I saw that, I realized that was the first time I saw Glenn move. We've got a recording of his voice and lots of photographs, but I never saw the man move. And there he was moving in the photograph or in the slide. So Lilly and Black scoured the city of Evansville for about 8 years trying to get them locals to pitch in and help buy this property. And they raised $127 from the good folks of Evansville out of 3 years of efforts. So Uncle Eli dug into his own pocket, and he paid $68,000 for this property in 1938. And in the name of the Indiana Historical Society, and Glenn was going to become the archaeologist to take over the operations here. So in April of '39, he and Ida moved into the house. And I took some comparative shots today of what it looked like today and what it looked like back then in 1939. One thing you should know, that the 2005 tornado came through the site and destroyed the garage and the library building you see behind it, and took the roof off the house and slammed it back down. And that was, in the process of all that, we decided we were going to restore the three structures to the way they looked about 1950. And that's pretty much what we've done. In the photograph on the left, the library has not been built yet. He built that about 1941, I believe. There he is sitting on his Buick beside the house, and there's my wife's Honda sitting beside the house today. We added an arbor a couple years back on the side of it. And then there's Ida, and Karen back here, that's her house across the street there, and in that earlier photograph, it's a cornfield still. And I think your house, when was that built, in the 50s?
64.
64, okay. So Glenn didn't even see that house being built. Those of you familiar with the property, this house sat basically out in a giant field. And all the woods that we have going to the west, the 400 acres, it was all open field when the blacks moved here. You could see where the Eastburg Trailer Park is from this location. If the trailer park was there, you would have been able to see it. So everything you see between here and there since since the mid-60s probably. Our maintenance guys stopped mowing it in the early 70s. This was something I didn't know about Ida. She apparently loved flowers. And all these rows of flowers at the top are where Karen's house sits today, across the street from the main house there. And you can see, looking through the trees here in the lower left, that's what the view would have been from the driveway. And then that's the backyard of the house as well. If you got any questions as we're going, shout them out. I'll make up something.
Just one comment, if I could.
Lay it on me.
From Dr. Black's house to our grandfather and grandmother's house, that open field you referred to, we recall, my sister and I, Sue here, we recall planting of roses. These rose bushes, what we call, I don't know, those roses.
Was it the multiflora rose?
Multiflora rose, all along that, from all the way up, house to house, and it along the road there. And so there's just maybe an extension of that love of flowers.
The funny thing about the multiflora rose, it's banned in the United States today because it's an invasive species that will take over.
Yeah.
Our maintenance guy, he's been here this is his 41st year working here, and in his early years, they fought the multiflora rose for years, because it went from the house up to the front gate also.
Yeah.
He tells me a story about how a deer was hit along the road, and its back legs were paralyzed, and the guy got out of the car and grabbed him by the back leg, and that deer took off with its front legs and dragged him through the multiflora rose up and down through there. But I think we eliminated most of the multiflora rose. It pops up every so often. But over on the left is the way it looked about 1948, and this is what it looks like today. We planted a pollinator field next to the house this summer. We have beehives on the property now, and USDA gave us money to put this pollinator field there. So I said, let's put it next to the house because Ida loved the flowers, and it's doing pretty well too.
That's very cool.
This was the library building right after it was built behind the house. This is where Black did all of his research and his writings and all of that. He stayed away from the barracks that were over here, those who remember those, and did all his private time over here. Some of the old students tell me that they would beg him to let him come work in this building because it had electricity and it had a fan and all of that. But he made them suffer over here in the old buildings. And like I said, that building was totally destroyed in the tornado. We found that south window and two of the closet doors. And the roof of it was leaning against Karen's picture window across the road. But it didn't break, it did. It cracked, didn't it, your window?
Yeah,
but it didn't break it.
It did.
Yeah. Lots of photos of people hanging out at the house, and what the guy at the top, where they're standing there like in their boxers, and the picture right below them, that couple's name was Ralph and Laura Dury. And my brother-in-law.
That's who I'm named after.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Really?
Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, my brother-in-law did some research. He was the first director of the Cincinnati Museum of Natural History, the youngest museum director in U.S. history. He was 18 years old when he took over the Cincinnati Museum of Natural History. And I imagine they met the Durys when Black went to Ohio State for less than a semester. Lilly sent him to Ohio State so he would have education under his belt, and people would give him more respect that way. But even after Glenn dies, Ida is still going on trips with Ralph and Laura Dury. There's a letter from Lilly to Ida after Glenn's death mentioning how they're going to take a trip to Florida with Ralph and Laura. And there's a picture of them sitting in front of the Taj Mahal. Do you remember that picture?
I have that picture.
Do you?
I do.
I'm gonna be crying before this day is over. I'm sure.
It was. They sent it to my mother.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So they hung out here quite a lot then, probably. For you to be named after them.
They visited pretty frequently.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things, this picture at the top, there's hanging up behind the garage. You see that vent. Glenn converted one side of the garage to a dark room for photo developing. All right, you three may be able to help me with this one. These people are called the Barnetts. And I have talked to so many people, and I've looked at maps around the property from that time period, and the name does not show up. But in the photo on the left, you can see the house sitting off in the distance, and they're sitting about where the maintenance area is today, or where the WPA camp would have been. That doesn't ring a bell?
No.
Okay, well, you're worthless to me now.
Yes. Maybe if they went to the funeral, it'll be in the
We'll
book.
check that out, yes. Yes. Is Kay Ann brought down the book from Glenn's funeral today?
Oh.
That'll be fun.
Wow.
Fun, that'll be interesting.
Or in the condolence letters.
Okay. Yeah, this kind of gives you an idea. That scene on the left is impossible to see nowadays because of the woods that have grown up there. I think this is 1948 when these photographs were taken. And there's one of the pictures has a wreath hanging on the door of the library there. One of the things that was said after the tornado, we never took photographs of the interior of this building. The maintenance guy and I had it in our minds, but he's old and I wasn't paying much attention. So we didn't know what the inside of the building looked like originally. We had the rough idea, and finally, and I'll show you here in a little bit, we finally have a photograph of the interior of the library. There's James Thornton up there visiting Glenn. That's 1950, and the hydrangea bush is still blooming there on the side of the house. And we're talking about reinstalling the screen porch on the house. After the tornado, there was this rib on both sides of the porch, and I said, let's get that off of there. It looks ugly. Well, the rib was how they mounted the screens to the building. So we're going to work on that this fall and put the screen back up. That's Ida with her Buick. For those familiar with the site, that tree behind her is one of the maple trees that's still over here at the maintenance area. And that driveway is the drive that goes back to the maintenance area. So I know they had a Buick. There's a story, Kincaid Mounds is over in southern Illinois, and it was excavated by the University of Chicago. Black gets a call from the University of Chicago in the 1950s saying, we're going to throw all this stuff away unless you want it, and come get it. He took that Buick 4 times to Chicago and filled it with all the artifacts from Kincaid. And then in the 1980s, the Glenn Black Lab transferred all that to southern Illinois. And so it went back to where it belongs. Glenn was a scrounger. He would save things, even though he had no use for it. There's a famous helmet from the man site over in Posey County. It's a copper helmet from the Hopewell era. It's the only complete copper helmet in existence. And it was found by a road crew in the early, 19 teens and whatever, and it was resided at U of E for years. And one day Glenn gets a call, we're throwing this thing out unless you come get it. So he went to U of E and he kept it here for years. And now it's up at the Glenn Black Lab in Bloomington. And Kay Ann has pointed out, Ida was a flashy dresser. She liked to doll up, didn't she?
Yes.
Well, she was a buyer at Watson's.
Okay.
Department store in Indianapolis
Yeah.
at one time.
And Kay Ann still has one of her fur wraps, don't
Yes.
you? Yeah. Because they were friends with Jack Householder, who was the furrier for Ellis Ayres in Indianapolis. And that's, I think it says Ellis Ayres in it, doesn't it?
I believe it did.
Yeah.
As a little girl, I remember her having lovely things. She always had lovely things.
This was one of the most exciting things for me to see what the inside of our house. I live in Glenn and Ida's house, to see what it looked like when they lived there. And a lot of people always mention the mirrors on the wall under the staircase. You can see that over there on the far left bottom. That's Mr. Lilly sitting in an easy chair in the house.
I got that love seat.
You have the love seat?
I have the love seat at the bottom of the stairs on the far left.
Okay.
I have that end table up there.
Oh, between Glenn and the other chair?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that TV went to Florida in my mother's house.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And was still working in the 80s.
Yeah. Now, there's only one set of photographs of a Christmas at the house, and you see it there with the flocked Christmas tree. And I realize a lot of their road trips are always around Christmas. They don't have children of their own, so they're taking off and going places during the Christmas holiday. That photograph of the kitchen, I believe, is probably right after it was installed. It's a nap and eat kitchen, high-end, hard maple.
It's very modern
Yeah,
for those times.
it is.
Yeah.
And we had the stove. We still use that stove when I first moved here, and it finally burned out. My wife was terrified we were going to burn the house down by me replacing the element myself. So we got rid of that and put a newer stove in there. But it was controlled by that panel on the wall behind it there. And you see in the lower right-hand photograph that ugly door with the 3 windows in it. When we moved in there after the tornado, I said that door could not have been here when the blacks lived here. It's ugly and cheap. And I thought I threw it away, but I found it in our attic of the garage the other day. And we had a door replicated that looked like the door that the first builder's house had on there. But if we ever go back to the Glenn and Ida look inside, we got the door to go still. This is a legendary story I was always told. And actually, I did some research today, and it wasn't what I thought it was. I was always told that Eli and Glenn had matching Corvettes. They had matching T-Birds, not Corvette. Glenn bought that Corvette in 1964 in the spring. This is Easter when he's getting his picture taken there. There's Eli Lilly sitting in the Corvette up at his house in Indianapolis. And Glenn only got to enjoy the car a few months. He died in September, actually September 2nd is when he died.
What did he die from?
It was a heart attack.
I was thinking it was.
Yeah.
But I couldn't
He was not a healthy person. He smoked his entire life. And then there's some report, or in some letter, Lilly refers to a horrible car wreck that Glenn was in the 1920s, where he ended up having scar tissue on his lungs. And so you're smoking on top of that, you're not helping yourself. This was the first time I saw the interior of the office for Angel Mounds. This building was over by, well, the maintenance area today. There were two similar buildings side by side, and this was in one of them. The other building was the new photo lab that he had at that point. The van up there was what they called the mag van. And magnetometry was this system where you would fire electricity into the ground. When it bounced back, it would pick up anomalies in the soil. Glenn was one of the first people in the world to use that. It was Angel Mounds and Mesa Verde, the cliff dwellings, that magnetometry was first used. And actually, there's photographs where he and Ida drove that van to Mesa Verde to help them do work out there with that as well. And then the middle photograph, that's the laboratory building that's over, that we've reconstructed over at the maintenance area. My goal, if I had my dream, is to reconstruct the entire WPA camp and the barracks that were in a circle.
The barracks were cool.
Yeah.
They were.
Except in the summertime, I'm told. I heard they were unbearable. And then this photograph on my side, that's Mound A, the large mound, there on the upper part of the photograph. I always joke with people that Glenn was a bodybuilder. He needed his gym refund. He wasn't getting what he needed out of it. All right, so Lilly and Black meet in 1931 on that road trip down here. And I was reading, James Madison wrote the book about Eli Lilly and said that in the 30s, Lilly would always refer to Black as Mr. Black. And then by 1948, he would address his letters to Dear Glenn. It was much into the 50s before Glenn would refer to him as Eli in the photograph, or in the letters. But there was a great line from one of the letters here. I was going to say, this is a letter from Eli to Glenn. You know, I hope that I love you like a brother or more so. They were tight. When Black died, it crushed Lilly. It was basically losing his son. Lilly had two sons that died in infancy, so he had no children, really, and Glenn was his buddy. It really shook him at that point. This is a boat that Lilly had brought over from Holland for the Lake Wawasee, their home up in northern Indiana. And this is the backyard of the home at Lake Wawasee. The house is still there.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Who was paying Dr. Black's wages, salary at that point?
Technically, it's the Indiana Historical Society.
Okay.
But I think we all know where the money was actually probably coming
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's records of gifts of stock, Eli Lilly stock.
Lots and lots
Well,
of Eli
we
Lilly.
have personal
Knowledge of that,
personal
yeah.
knowledge of that, yeah.
There's Captain Eli on one of his other boats there in Lake Wawasee. And then I read that Glenn started encouraging Eli to get into woodworking, and Eli actually built this gate, and that's on the house, or at the house up at Wawasee. You need to stand up straight.
Eli had a passion for Asian stuff.
Did he?
Up in Indianapolis, there's the next to Connor Prairie.
At Connor Prairie, yes.
Is the Asian house.
Yes, yes. And I know they're restoring that or opening it up very soon to the public as a rental place at Connor Prairie.
Lilly used to have, they could use it as a conference meeting place.
Okay.
I worked at Lilly for 21 years, and we did go up there one time and have an off-site meeting in the Asian house there next to Connor Prairie.
I have a bunch of ivory carved little figurines
Oh.
that are Buddha and a bunch of things that was in the Black stuff. And I always thought they probably were gifts from Lilly. But that makes sense.
Yes. He had a lot. He had the gold coin collection that probably everybody knows Lilly did. and that's at the Smithsonian because it couldn't stay in Indianapolis. He had a passion for the Asian stuff, and he did dabble in art. There was a piece, when he saw art, he said, I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And he would dabble, anyway, that's what I know.
Yeah.
That's neat.
I saw this photograph of him taking a picture of that piece of driftwood, and you go, and I'll show you, here's the next picture. It's actually got little plastic dinosaurs on it. So you can see these people became real to me. The longer I kept going through all this stuff, they did screwy things also, just like we do. This is one of the earliest road trips I saw in the slides that they took. This is Shelby County. You see the Mounds here on the left hand or right hand side. But there's Lilly squeezing through a barbed wire fence. Here's one of the richest men in the United States squeezing through a barbed wire fence looking at Indian mounds. This was the next cool thing. This was a 2.5-week trip that they took. And Glenn actually wrote a diary about this road trip. And this actually brings up your grandfather. I was actually looking at it just a minute ago. Glenn had the lock and dam at Owensboro call him at the house to say when the Delta Queen was coming through the lock and dam there, which would give him an hour and 12 minutes to get ready before it got to the Newburgh lock and dam. And he talks about how he and I were rushing to get dressed, and they jumped in the car and they rode over to your grandfather's house and told him to get up and take them to the lock at Newburgh and wait for the Delta Queen. And he said it was so nasty that morning you didn't see the ship until it actually came into the lock. It was raining and foggy. That's Eli standing at the railing. Ruth and Eli paid for this trip. This was a dream trip for Glenn and Ida. They had always wanted to do this. They had planned to do it the year before, 1948, and for some reason the Green Line, which ran the Delta Queen at that point, canceled that particular trip. But what you're going to see here is they went from Newburgh all the way up to Hannibal and then all the way down to New Orleans and then back up. So it was a long trip. This is actually at Natchez when this photograph was taken. So, I imagine myself being another person on the boat and realizing, there's Mr. Eli Lilly sitting here, just hanging out with us. And his eyebrows are enormous. You ever notice that? They're almost like Groucho eyebrows. But that's Ida sitting between he and Ruth in that photograph. And this photograph was taken right as they were meeting the Wabash, where it meets the Ohio on their way back to Evansville. This all happened in between October 3rd and October 17th, I believe, of 1949. And there they all are dapper up on the deck. I think that photo on the left was the one that was in the paper. I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, the article in the Courier ran in the Indianapolis Star also. It was nice to see Glenn back in the paper again in Indianapolis. And you local people may remember, this is the president that used to be on a dock in St. Louis for years and years. I remember that when I was a kid, seeing this dock there. And then I believe the president was dismantled and sits in a cornfield somewhere up in Illinois now. There are numerous trips over to New Harmony. I think this is one of their first, and that's Ruth and Eli Lilly in the maze, or the labyrinth at New Harmony. And then that's the Robert Dale Owen house next to it there, or the laboratory, as they call it today. And this, I sent the next photograph I'm showing, I sent it to Dr. Madison up at Bloomington, and he got a real kick out of it. The blacks went down to the Smokies quite a lot. This was a trip they went with Ruth and Eli. And then they came back and they hit my old Kentucky home in Harrodsburg and all of that. And they went to Cherokee and they're getting their pictures with the Indians and all of that kind of stuff. And these two photographs are taken in a place called Blackberry Farm, which is a retreat. And it's still there today. You can still go down there. It's like an inn of some sort. But this was a chauffeur-driven trip to the Smokies. That's the Lily's Cadillac, and there's your chauffeur. And when I sent this to Dr. Madison, he said it wasn't nice of them to dress for the tourists down in Tennessee. They even had roadside lunches outside of the Cadillac there. They went to Williamsburg. These, like Ian, I told you, these are always around Christmas time. Glenn and I go back to Williamsburg, and then they hit Norfolk and all of that, Jamestown, and another trip. But you can see in the photograph here on my side, there's Eli, Ruth, and Ida. When I put this together, I started thinking, is this going to be as bad as my grandparents showed me their vacation trip? I think it's a little better than that. I hope it's a little better.
So then Dr. Black took most of these pictures?
A lot of them, you can, unless he's in the photograph, you know he's the one taking the picture. They took a trip in '55 to look at some of the more prominent mounds over in Ohio. That's Eli in front of the Great Serpent Mound. And then they went to the Newark Mounds, and then this over here is a cliff dwelling, or a rock shelter dwelling down in southern Ohio. And this is my favorite trip that they took. Hannibal, Missouri, painting Tom Sawyer's Fence. This is, like I said, is 1963, and it was Ruth and Eli and Glenn and Ida in a station wagon hitting Route 66. I'm thinking, when Eli Lilly died, he was, by today's standard, was worth $670 million. And he's tooling across the country in a station wagon with Glenn Black. Yeah. And what is great about this trip, they take a picture of every motel. They stop, just like my grandparents would do. And fortunately, because of this, I was able to pinpoint exactly where they were on the trip. And I could, either the motels are still there, or I can find an old postcard online saying where they were. And this is, I believe, Joplin, Missouri. So this is right before they start heading north instead of following 66. And they're going straight to Colorado to the cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde. Even taking pictures of the motels, bars. And there's Glenn loading everything up for Ruth and Eli and Ida. So, I mean, can you imagine just tooling across the country with a half a billionaire in your car?
They must have had a lot of fun together.
They must have, yeah.
Must have.
I was going to originally call this like the Hope and Crosby road shows, but I refrained from doing that. There they are at the Four Corners, and there's Glenn spread out on 4 states. And you notice he's always got a cigarette in his hand.
Yeah.
Always, he won't put it down for nothing. This is Wolf Creek Pass in Colorado.
It makes me wonder if the women liked each other as much as the guys.
That's something I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Curious.
I get the sense that they probably weren't the best of friends, lady friends.
They don't really always look the happiest.
No. I know Eli was 15 years older than Glenn. I don't know what the age difference between Ida and Ruth were. I think Ida was younger than Glenn a few years. So you may be talking about a 20-year age difference between the two.
Yeah.
And here we are at Mesa Verde. That's Lily looking across the canyon to the Cliff Palace. Always in a suit for the tourists. You know, that's what Dr. Madison said. And this is one of the excavations on top of one of the mesas there at Mesa Verde. So Eli must have taken that picture. She's the one not in there. And I sent this photograph to the Mesa Verde National Park, and they told me who the gentleman is there, who was the archaeologist in 1963 heading up the project. And there he is in his suit getting ready to crawl in the tent. And then here they are getting back to Pollock Avenue in the dark. And Lily wrote a poem. It's a three-page poem, I think, isn't it, Kay-Ann? About the trip to Mesa Verde. We have it floating around here somewhere. But yeah, that was a memorable trip. One of the things about the Blacks that a lot of people don't know, Ida started the Evansville Lapidary Society. And did you guys ever go into the basement of the house where she had a rock shop and she had cutting tools and benches everywhere? This was their first setup at a prominent, I think this was Chicago, where they set up for the Evansville Lapidary Society. Pretty fancy. But this was the first photograph I ever found of the interior of the lab building, or library building. And the caption on the slide said, "The location of the founding of the Evansville Lapidary Society. That was Ida's desk in the corner there. And when I started here, that light fixture was in a box, and it was ugly, and we were throwing things out to get rid of it. So now we're on a hunt for a similar light fixture. Put it back in there. And then this is Ida down in the basement of the house. And Kay-Ann, she has a lot of the lapidary. She donated some of it to the Lapidary Society. There was a trophy to Ida for founding
There was
it.
plaques, trophies,
Yeah.
and there was newsletters.
Lots of newsletters.
Lots of newsletters. And so she cut stones too?
Yeah, apparently. Yeah.
Because I have one stone, wrapped up that says, first stone cut by Glenn.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know she brought down a great big plaque to Ida, founder of the Evansville Lapidary Society, first president of the Evansville Lapidary Society. And then there's a little teeny one, Lynn Black, second president of the Evansville Lapidary Society. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is probably one of the last photos of Glenn. You see there, it's dated November of '64. He died in September. So this was developed after his death. This was a group from the Indiana Historical Society. That is one mean-looking woman there in the middle. I would not want to tackle her.
That's my grandmother.
She's in a time warp or something. But you see, Glenn's holding the kneeling man figurine, and the one thing, he's got a cigarette in his hand. And I think this is probably one of the weakest looking photographs I've ever seen of him. So imagine, there's other photographs of this day, and it's in the fall, so I imagine it's pretty close to one of the last photographs ever taken of the guy.
Is that an Indian artifact? That kneeling?
It is. It's the figurine that was found in the Temple Mound in 1940, and it's up at the IU. We don't keep it here. The funny thing is, when Glenn found that, he kept it in a Folgers coffee can under his bed at the house. And that was high security. If we bring the kneeling man down here for any displays, he gets an armed escort from Bloomington. We have armed guards in the building, and then he gets an armed escort back to Bloomington. So that's kind of a smattering of the photos and the slides. I think we have about 1,700 photos and slides combined, thanks to Kay-Ann. And then I'll develop this more and more as time goes on. But some of the really cool stuff she gave us was his desk that sat in the library there on the property, and it was probably where he wrote the 2-volume set about the Angel site. We had there's some bad parts on it, we had those restored, and you can see it sitting over there. And this was something I got really excited about. When you were a student of Glenn Black in the 40s, you were automatically made a member of the Trowel and Brush Society. These are solid gold keys at the Indiana Historical Society. Do you guys have one of these floating around maybe? They were given to the students, but for being an excavator here at the site. And I had one loaned to me so I could make a copy of it, but nobody would ever give us one. And we're up there talking to Kay-Ann. I said, have you ever seen one of these? And she pulled this out, and one stamped GAB on the back, and the other one stamped IMB, Ida Mae Black and Glenn A. Black. And that's his Masonic watch chain there. But once a year he would type up a really lame newsletter and send it out to everybody about what the students were doing here and there. And then this was another really cool thing. In the 1930s and 40s, when you joined the Indiana Historical Society, you were given a copy of the Prehistoric Antiquities of Indiana, a book Eli Lilly wrote. And on the open market, they go for about $200 now. Aside, like I said, they were free in the early days. And Glenn used to have a stack of them in the library. I read a letter. His stack was getting low, and he needed more sent down here. This we pulled out, and it's leather bound. I've never seen a leather bound version of it in a slip cover. And it's signed from Eli to Glenn. You see it's over there. The frontispiece is open, so you can see the signature there. So that was really cool. It's field binoculars from here on the site.
Well, I started at Eli Lilly in 1993.
Uh-huh.
When I started there, they gave every new employee a book of the history of Eli Lilly and Company.
Yeah.
So the book thing is Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And I haven't contacted the Historical Society. They're the ones that published that book to see how many of the leather-bound versions there were. That one has a number 7 on the inside of the cover. So I assume there's at least 7 of them at one time floating around. And then this thing blew our mind. I had never seen this, and then Kane had a photograph of him actually smoking this pipe, and there's a lithograph that was made of him smoking the pipe. And it's not an artifact. It was made probably in the 20th century. But yeah, we never knew he smoked something like that.
We had a piece like that from Grandpa. It's not a bird, I don't remember what it is.
Oh, really?
It's the pipe thing.
Yeah.
Kind of makes you wonder if somebody carved it.
It probably
around
was.
Here, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And then this next picture is probably, to me, probably the most cool artifact of the site. The first trowel used at Angel Mounds in May of 1939. And you all know how big a trowel normally starts out at, so this thing was worn down to the nub, basically.
But the one I had that I gave to IU
Uh-huh.
was that same size.
Okay.
So I don't know if,
We have different sizes.
yeah, or
It's also-
maybe he liked the little one for the vines. I don't know.
Possibly. So that's the end of my talk for right now.
All right.
You guys have any questions?
Thank you, Mike.
Ask me, I'll make up something.
Where did Dr. Black, where was he educated? Where did he get his PhD?
He didn't. His PhD was an honorary one from Wabash College.
Oh, okay, I wondered if you were saying when he had time to.
Yeah, he only went to college for like 7 months, and that was it. And he taught at IU, but it was Wabash College that gave him the honorary doctorate. It wasn't IU.
Where did he get his training in archaeology?
He was self-taught. Back in those days, there was no one to learn from. So some of the things he would have done back in the day are probably not considered acceptable today. Like smoking in an archaeology dig. The flick of your ash will throw off a carbon date hundreds of years. He didn't know that, though, at the time. And it's interesting. This whole exhibit out in the main building is based on his work up until '64. IU began doing digs again in '05. And they did about 8 years of digs. The information, because of the advances in science that they've pulled from the site, would floor him today. They're able to pull pollen samples out. They know that the big mound now was built in the fall because all the pollen that's located in it is fall pollen. Things that he would never even been able to wrap his mind around. He shot all the elevations here with a transit, and now we can fly an airplane over the place and pull things up that he couldn't even imagine were out there.
What was the purpose of the mounds?
These mounds are status symbols. The bigger the mounds you lived on, the more important you were in the community. Now, the one across the street is 1,000 years older, and it is a burial mound in the classic sense. And IU tested it about 8 years ago, and it still has a hollow tomb in the middle of it. It hasn't collapsed after 2,000 years.
So
Knock on wood.
can you relate this community back in what, 11 to 1300, 200 years
Mhm.
to Cahokia and all? Are these all Mississippians?
They're all Mississippians. These people probably had a tie with Cahokia. Kincaid Mounds down near Metropolis, Illinois, had a tie to Cahokia. And they all petered out around the year 1450. And there's several ideas. One is that this region was going through the little ice age, and the average temperature was dropping about 3 degrees a year. And they were growing corn from Central America that was probably starting to fail. And then in recent years, IU found out that this place was hit with a massive earthquake around the year 1400. So violent that there's places where the grass was rolling over on itself. And those familiar with New Madrid, which we think it's the same fault that hit this one, New Madrid had sand geysers, sand blowing up out of the ground because it was vibrating so much it liquefies. We have evidence where the sand was moving up through the soil here, but never broke the surface. So we're not the epicenter. That's why we don't have it as violent as that. But yeah, by 1450, Cahokia is gone. The cliff dwellings in Mesa Verde are gone. It's a whole continental thing that's happening at that point.
So officially, these are here in Angel Mounds, it's the middle Mississippians, has that been, or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, you hear sometimes mentioned as Middle Mississippi or just Mississippian now.
Yeah.
What was the time frame of the Dixon burial grounds over Nome? Same?
Yes.
Okay.
See how positive I was on that one? Yes. Dixon's Mississippian as well. There's Dixon, Kincaid, and then what's the one over across from Cairo? I always forget that one. Wycliffe Mounds is down there. We're all Mississippian sites.
Are not the ones in Ohio older?
They're more of the Hopewell area, like
That's
the one
what I was
across the
thinking.
street.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
We refer to the one across the street as
Oh,
Hopewell.
well.
Yes.
So did Dr. Black get started on that trip with Eli Lilly?
Essentially, yeah.
Did
Yeah.
he have a previous interest in Native American history?
Not that I know of. They took this road trip, fell in love with it, and then, you've got a sugar daddy there waiting to give you money to keep doing this
Right,
stuff.
right.
Well, the
I
depression.
know in 32 he was working over in
Yes.
Dearborn County on the Nolan Mounds.
Okay.
And he took that one all the way to the ground. When he got to Angel, he refused to do that ever again, except the please Eli, he excavated the Temple Mound almost all the way to the ground. Black said these mounds are social centers and you're not going to learn anything about how the common lifeways work. But he sacrificed the Temple Mound for Uncle Eli to make him happy. Yeah.
I think over in Spencer County, near Friendship Cemetery, kind of halfway between Richland and Rockport.
Uh-huh.
I believe out in one of them farm fields, there's a mound.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it.
And I don't